Hey everybody, and welcome to DBS Films Podcast. My name is Kellen, and with me as always is my brother Brendan, and together we make movies with DBS Films. Today we are actually going to go ahead, we're still reviewing the first 8 movies that we made, and we wanted to basically just look and see if there were a few things that we learned from each one of them, a little tips of each one, and so that's what we're going to do and dive in today. Before we get started, as always, The Girl in Cabin 13 is on Tubi for free. If you haven't seen it yet, please take a look at it. It is by far the best film that we've done. We also have an amazing Discord community that is growing every single day. We have almost 500 members. Probably by the time you listen to this, we'll have over that. So it's really cool seeing how fast that's growing, but it's a really fun place to hang out, and you get a ton of free perks. You know, you get to watch our movies before they come out. You get discounts on merch. You get a ton of really cool stuff, and we only want to continue to empower our community as we continue to grow. So if that sounds interesting to you, take a look at our links. Go ahead, hop in there, and I think you'll enjoy it. We got a really cool place. So, Brendan, we've made 8 movies, and honestly, I think the best part of the 8 is the fact that we learned so much from each one of them. As you've mentioned before, it really is almost like our tuition, but you kind of just want to, before we hop into each one, just explain the importance of finishing a product when it comes to filmmaking, and how that is probably more so than the actual outcome, how the movie does, how that really is the best thing that you can really find as an indie filmmaker at this stage.
Yeah, I don't think you can really take a deep dive into the movie and really reflect on the movie unless it's completed, unless you've actually gotten something finished. The most valuable thing that I own right now is the ability to take a look back at the 8 films that I made and, just reflect on them and try and see, what I did well and, what I need to really work on for the next movie. And I think that the ability to do that has really helped me improve and helped our production improve. And we made the first 8 movies, and then we had about a year off just because we had 2 in post-production. We had COVID hit. But during that time, I went back and rewatched them all. I took notes on, what I thought we did well, and I took notes on what I thought we needed to improve on. And the next movie we made was Girl in Cabin 13. And obviously you can see the huge jump in production value, story-wise, acting-wise, production-wise, just from that movie. And I don't think that would have been the case unless I had, a portfolio of 8 of these movies, and I took the time to self-reflect and really dig deep into these movies and try and figure out what we did well and what we needed to really improve on.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing there, because there's so many people out there in the indie film community who I think have the wrong expectation of, it's just one, I just need to make my feature, I just need to make this, and then it's done. When really, the more you can make, the stronger you will get and the better you will be at this process. So that, yeah, okay, it might be the one, but if it's not, you can continue to keep making and continue to keep producing. Because I feel like something that unfortunately happens in this industry is you make a movie, you get the final result, you get so burned out by it, you're just like, I guess I'm not a filmmaker, and then you quit. And, I can completely understand why. It's one of the other things where, this is still something that we're focusing our efforts on as much as we can, but also understanding, hey, we're trying to get the minimal viable product. This isn't something that we're going to bet the farm on or anything like that it'll succeed. We're taking very cautious steps in this process. And the reason for that is because we understand that, having that finished product and having that movie allows you to then just generate so much more wealth of knowledge that you can take forward in your filmmaking career. So with that being said, we hope you guys enjoy some of these tips coming up. We're going to hop through the first 8 of our movies, otherwise known as the Hateful 8. And it is something where, man, looking back and watching them again with the super fans, because we do Movie Mondays, a lot of people, when we talk about our movies, are like, oh, they're better. Don't talk like that. Or, they think we're almost hypercritical of it, but we're not really. I mean, we just, you have to call out what the issues were. But with that being said, I know you share the same testament. you just love them to death still. It's such an amazing product. It's still your baby. It's still something that, like, even though you're like, yeah, we screwed up here and look at this and that was terrible, you still have an immense amount of pride from just having a finished product and watching it again. So, before we hop in to get all critical, do you want to kind of talk about the balance of how it is important to take feedback as well?
Yeah, and I think this is an issue with some indie filmmakers, or at least an issue that I see with a lot of other startups and small businesses that I work with. You have to take pride in your work. And I'm extremely thankful for everyone that I've worked with. I'm extremely thankful for all the actors that I worked with. Everyone has been absolutely excellent. I am extremely proud of every single one of these movies, my little 8 children. And they're all good. They're all extremely good. I'm super happy with all of them. That being said, my goal is to get better. And if your goal is to get better, you have to really be critical on yourself. You have to really be objective. You have to remove your ego, and you have to say, look, we tried our best here, but we missed. This just didn't turn out as well. Why didn't it turn out like that? And how do we fix it moving forward? So yeah, it can sound like we're negative to these movies, but we're not. I'm not. I love all my movies. I think they're all excellent. I'm super proud of everyone that worked on them. But in order to get better, I really have to be a perfectionist. Every little thing that I can get better at, I have to identify it, and I have to game plan to get better at it moving forward. And I think that's tough for a lot of people to do, because, obviously you have this grand vision of the perfect movie in your head. And when it doesn't come out like that, it's a hard truth, and you have to sit down and really just evaluate yourself objectively. And so that's pretty much what I do. That's my mindset. So when I do this podcast, a lot of the feedback I get from other people is, why are you so negative? Well, it's just where my mind is right now. That is how I get better. And it's something that, works for me. But that being said, I love all these movies to death. I love all the people that worked on them. And I'm going to try and find, so essentially what we're going to do now is an exercise that I do when I self-reflect on these movies. I try and find 3 things that we did really, really well, and then 3 things that we either messed up or were mistakes or that we'll never do again. So that's what we'll go through now. We'll go through the 8, and I'll just tell you essentially my notes on the feedback that I gave myself.
Yeah, I think, exactly what you're mentioning is super critical, just because what, you see a lot is people refuse to take criticism, or they refuse to take feedback. And that, again, it's because they don't have the long-term picture in their mind. Whereas we'll be very open. We try and flush it out. We always say the only thing, like, 1 stars are great, 5 stars are great. The only thing that's bad is no reviews and not understanding. So with that in mind, let's hop into the first one. The very first movie we had, Gone. So what were those 3 things that kind of stuck out to you, Brendan?
So for Gone, the good. I'll start with the good. The fact that we were able to actually make a movie, that was like one of my main takeaways, that we were actually able to get a crew together. I was able to get actors together, and I was able to go from script to production to, final, like editing, and to get something uploaded. So the fact that we were able to do this, and it's actually physical, it's tangible, we did something, was just my main takeaway, that we have a minimal viable product to work on and get better from. The second thing was, we did a couple of pull scares where we pulled the actors out of frame. And if you speed this up in post, I thought that they turned out really well. They were quick, scary little pulls that if you put a little stinger noise on there, I thought they worked pretty well. So that was, something that I was like, all right, we can go back and do some pull scares. And the intro I thought on Gone was actually pretty well. Having a girl run, she's kind of covered in blood. It's quick cuts. It's a little bit mysterious. It's long enough to get your interest, and you don't really know what's going on, but it's enough to get you to watch the movie. So I was really happy with how the intro is done. I thought for our first time at doing this, we pulled it off pretty well.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, honestly, those pull scales, they hit. I don't know why we stopped doing those for a little bit. And I think I keep saying for the shapeshifter, we need to go back and do 1 or 2 of those, because they did look really good. I think honestly for Gone, I almost really do discount it a bit. And I say, well, hey, that was the first one. It's not feature length because it was going to be an anthology. So there's a lot of different things going for it. I discount it a lot, in my opinion, because it is of the shorter length and whatnot. I'm like, oh, it's not really something there. With that being said, though, we got a ton of super fans who like it. They say, like, I really like Gone, and their only complaint was, like, I wish it was longer and, like, more fleshed out. So, like, that's just a testament. They like the idea, even though it was almost kind of like a not fully formed movie, the almost the essence of it or the ether of the movie was really good to some people and they really liked it. So those are the three things, I definitely agree with that. The biggest thing is that we had something that was a finished product. That's a huge achievement. I don't care who you are. If you get something done and completed, congratulations. Like, you've really done it. It's such a task. So what were through the things that we, experienced that we're going to end up avoiding now?
The biggest one was to make sure we have proper data management. And I'm honestly really lucky that this happened on the first movie, because it allowed us to learn from this mistake and never repeat it again. We basically lost footage. We're using like one memory card, and the DP accidentally formatted the card, and that deleted the footage. So making sure we had proper backups, that we always have 2 hard drives working at a time, that we're properly labeling our dumps, and we're just making sure that there's always 2 copies of everything. And now we don't even delete anything now. We transfer the data onto 3 different sources. I get a copy, my brother gets a copy, and then I just keep all the hard drives from the camera with all the footage on there just in case. And we're all in different vehicles in case, like, I get tired and driving to a lake and the footage is gone. Kel's got a copy. So that's just what you need to do if you're going to do one of these things. If you lose a hard drive, if you drop it, if it breaks, your whole shoot's done. I mean, you essentially have to start over. So make sure you have proper data management. The second thing was how missing on the beats can really affect your story. So when you're writing a script, you're like, oh, this scene's going to be great. It's going to hit, it's going to build tension. And in this scene, it was, or in this movie, we had a scene where the main character goes and he's trying to start the car and it won't start. So he's trying to get out of there. And when we were writing the script, we're like, this is a really cool scene because now he's stuck here. So it's going to be super tense, and the audience is going to, feel it. And and the character is going to be like all over the place because he can't leave and he's stuck in this, terrible situation that could possibly kill him. And there's going to be all this cool tension and mystery. And that just fell flat. Nobody liked that scene. It was just flat acted, and it wasn't the fault of the actor. It was just written very poorly. It was shot very poorly. So it was completely my fault. But when you miss on a scene, now you have to go another. So the way I think we had this one, we had like 7 or 8 minutes of downbeats. We had a beat scene and then 7 or 8 minutes of downbeats. If you miss on that scene, now you have 15 minutes, which is pretty much half the movie where nothing has happened. And it really just affects the pacing of the movie. So that was like one thing that we needed to focus on, is that if you do miss in a beat, make sure you have another beat coming up, or at least some way of mitigating that, because if you do miss on it, you're going to have a lot of issues. And I think that was a problem that we had in the Devil in the Room movie, where we were just missing on a lot of beats and it just became a very dialogue heavy movie. And the last thing was just focus on the screenplay. The screenplay was kind of just all over the place because it was our first one. We were going from novels and book writing to essentially writing screenplays. So it had like crazy stuff in there that's just hard to film or just doesn't make any sense. There really wasn't any kind of structure or rhyme or reason to it. It just kind of flowed. And if the movie was like an hour and a half, it would have been a complete mess. I think what saved it was that it was only 30 minutes. So I think this was just, all right, we really have to see, how do we hone up our screenplay, writing a screenplay, because going from a book to a screenplay is not as easy as I thought it would be.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, honestly, just going through those data management, there's nothing more demoralizing than not having the footage there. And I just recently, literally 2 days ago, our side business, the main hard drive for that one just bricked. So I was telling you, I was already having some issues with it. And, I was acting weird. Thankfully, I have another backup for all the other stuff. but then it just stopped working. And that's a hard drive. And I mean, like, that can happen at any point in time, and you're sleep deprived when you're doing it. I'll never forget in The Devil in the Room, or just removing it so we, would delete the flat or the drive and then give it back to you. There was so much anxiety I have from doing that final delete. I'm staring at it saying, yes, we have a copy here. Yes, we have a copy here. But I'm also running on, 3 hours of sleep. So it's a hard decision to finally hit that delete button. Whereas now, I mean, multiple times it's been like, yeah, we got one there, another one there, and we never deleted it. And just having the peace of mind is so great. And then, for the next thing, really, when it came down to what you're mentioning with the different beats and having them hit, I think one of the biggest issues with that is when you're in the writing process, the story is a lot more clear to you. And it's also a lot more intense in your head because you're the one actually writing it and you see it very clearly. And I think what ended up happening here is, we had the scene where they essentially walked in a circle, which, is pretty typical in a lot of horror movies. And it's like, that's a big scare. And the car doesn't turn on, like we were mentioning, but it was kind of in broad daylight and we didn't really give them much to do with it. And I think, this is something where it still takes us a little bit to understand, but going into the writing process and understanding that your beats need to be a lot more intense than you think they are, and your story needs to be a lot more clear than you think it is, because it's always kind of, in your head and a little bit of that. But again, overall, I'm really surprised that the amount of super fans I've seen that said they like Gone, they want a sequel to Gone. They're just all about it. Because again, we had a good intro. We had a pretty good climax in the sense that like something happened. We just had no clue what we were doing in kind of the middle. And again, it's always a testament to our team. Anything that we mentioned is, again, coming from just our inexperience as producers and just working on the set. But really, really amazing to see that. So that wraps up the first one. This is one that a lot of the super fans are saying it's their favorite, which is great for me because I love The Invited. I really do. We just watched it last Monday, and man, what's really great about it is it's weird. It like keeps you into it because it was the biggest. I think it's still by far the biggest idea we've ever done. Had the most people. It was such a bold idea. We basically made this really easy to film Gone movie, and then the next thing, you greenlit, and as you mentioned, I think right off the bat when we talked about it, you're like, I never should have greenlit this one, and I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole, knowing what we know now. But we did it, and it was a finished product, which again is amazing. But man, it was a wild ride. So walk me through the Invited and your thoughts, and then we'll go into what the 3 things we did well were.
I mean, yeah, it's a wild movie, and I think it could be cool. And I definitely have a Invited 2.0 script that we've talked about, and I think it just needed more drugs, it needed more sex, it needed more nudity, it needed to be like Eyes Wide Shut meets like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And I think you can make like a really cool movie in there. I think it's got a lot of topics that are relevant today, essentially like what do you want to do with your life, especially with like people working and burning out. So, I mean, I definitely think there's a really cool movie in there, and it would definitely be one that I'd love to revisit. The problem is you need to have a pretty big budget for this movie because there's going to be a lot of actors. You're going to need a lot of locations. You're going to need a lot of special effects. It's just not one at the budget level that we're at right now, and probably the skill level we're at right now, where I can really confidently say we'd be able to pull this off properly.
Yeah, I mean, I've even talking, I say the same exact thing. I'm like, man, I think I would need like a $5 million budget, like because you really do need to go above and beyond. But I think it could be a really fun visual experience too. We have another movie script called Overdose, which kind of has a little bit of drug mentality, but mainly in the sense of being able to just really enhance the visuals. And I think, one thing we were talking about is you have such a fun visual realm to play in, that would be a really cool movie to also film it and do that too. And, as you mentioned, we just really don't have that much experience for that. So what were the 3 things that, in your opinion, we did well on The Invited?
So the 3 things that I learned is fire looks really cool. The fire pit scenes, both at the mansion and out in the woods, were really, really cool. You don't need lights with fire. It glows on their face. It looks really cool. And it's honestly like an indie trick. Anytime I could use candles, fire pits, or just fire in general, it's such a good shot. And it's just, we always fall back on it. I always try and add fire to the movies. We have the girl in camera 13 torch scene. We have Devil in the Room had like the fire pit scene. There's a lot of stuff in there where just rule one with DBS is try and light something on fire, but do it safely. Obviously, do it safely.
Yeah, not yourself.
Yeah, don't do that. The other thing would be, I thought the finale was actually pretty good. From when Blake decides that Curtis is in trouble, him running around taught me that like the Ronin, if you can get it as a oneer, provides a really good ROI. That was 40 seconds worth of footage that we essentially got, and it took us maybe 5 minutes to get that shot. So the ROI of that was great. And then running through the woods and, you know, going to the fire pit, I thought that was one of our better finales. And it had like the squibs and the gunshots. So I thought it taught me that like you really have to have a good finale, and it should be paced. And it really should be, if you're working with an hour and 20-minute movie, it should be about 20 minutes of your movie. Really give it the time it deserves. Because then that's when people are going to leave feedback. They want to see that ending. They want to see like a proper resolution if they're giving you an hour and a half of their time. And then I think that I really like the lodge scene. The lodge is the bar that they went to, and just the locations in general. You could really make a lot of, if you have a lot of different locations, it really ups your production. Now it's a pain because you have to set up and move people around. It's not very indie friendly. But if you can do it, we had them like in my office, we had them on the roof, we had them in the bar, we had them downtown, we had them in mansions. They were constantly moving around in locations that looked really, really cool. So I think that being able to up your production, if you can get access to different locations, is something that you can do to just give your movie a little more diversity and a little more depth.
I completely agree. I mean, you know, just going through the top there, love fire. Glad the torch scene panned out so well in Girl in Cabin 13. And it's something that, you know, we're looking at doing it again because it's natural lighting, it looks cool, and it's an easy hack. I mean, even when we do the pickup shots, when we're doing just montages, just putting them by candles, looks great. So that's definitely something, especially if you're in the horror, embrace the flame, do it safely. When the, you know, finale, as you mentioned, I mean, we used the squib, which, you know, that was something that production wise, that's the first time I think it's one of our best shots. You know, Carl's is pretty good, but kind of a little unclear. You know, we mentioned you can't really see it, but I think what was good with this one is the finale moved, and it's something that, you know, like you were saying, you can prolong the finale, because realistically, the finale started when he was searching, like once Curtis woke up. And he was kind of like blindfolded. That whole section kind of blends together in the finale. Whereas some of our other movies, it'll end up, the pacing gets dropped before the final conclusion, or it just happens so fast. And I think, you know, we really saw like, what does a rising tension feel like? And then how does it execute well with, you know, the final scene there? And those are really cool. And then I completely agree with the production value. And it's something that I bring up a lot after seeing The Unseen. You know, I was like, really, we try and be strategic now. So, you know, when can we film somewhere else just to make it look different, like a different place, because it does add production value. And, you know, anytime you can trick production value in your movie, it's you're going to be doing yourself a benefit. You know, like my brother said a lot of times, you have to try and cheat that $1 million movie as much as you can. And I think one of the good things was, you know, we had a really nice house. We had a really good bar scene. We had outdoor scenes. We had a lot of things that melded together, which I think serves why it's so weird. Cause like, you know, you don't get the straight indie vibe right away from it. You kind of get this weird feeling from it because we do have a lot of things in place that does give it a good production value. But that being said, we had no clue how to really execute on it. So that's kind of what you ended up getting. But I love The Invited. I think it's something that we'll continue to work with. So now that we talked about the 3 things that we learned, you know, what were the 3 bad things that made us learn even more? Because a lot of times, you know, those are the ones that really stick with you.
Yeah, the first one's audio issues. This one had a lot of audio issues. The whole scene on the roof was shot right next to an air conditioning unit. And I'm not really sure how the sound guy was like, yeah, this is going to work. So that had to be all ADR'd. And you can do ADR work if it's like small little phrases, if you're trying to get them to say all this stuff and have it match up, it's good luck with that. It's just not going to happen. So their lips are off, and it doesn't sound very good. It doesn't sound very natural. And we actually had an actor on there who was like, what, you guys should use lav mics. And we're like, no. Our sound guy was like, no, boom mics is the way to go. Lav mics, no, that's for like interviews and documentaries. And I really wish we would just learned how to use lav mics here, because it would have saved us a lot of problems. We only use lav mics now. Will we eventually get a boom? Yes. But for indie filmmakers who are on a budget, lav mics is where you want to go. But yeah, this one had a lot of audio issues with it. Working with a large cast, we did a horrible job, which is bringing people on and scheduling them to show up at a certain time. We had multiple people sitting around doing nothing for day, or essentially a whole day. We weren't aware of people's time. We would have them show up at 1 in the afternoon, and we didn't start shooting them till 1 in the morning. So that was like a huge problem. And just working with a giant cast in general was new. A lot of people come to me for questions, and it was just a kind of an overwhelming experience when I was trying to make a movie and shoot a movie, and I had to deal with 15, 20 people on set. And then finally, like the screenplay was just kind of a mess. I remember like going back and forth with the writer, and we had 3 or 4 different versions of the script. We had one version that was almost 300 pages, that's like a 3-hour movie. So we just didn't have like a very concrete script on this one. So it really taught me to really look at like beats and making sure certain scenes hit and are impactful, because we missed on a lot of these scenes, and the movie just drags. It kind of just floats around. There's not a lot of like scares or interesting scenes, and the stuff like where he cuts his hand just never really comes off as cool as it was in our head. So really looking at proper beat structure, making sure that there's something spooky happening every 5 to 8 minutes, that we're kind of making scripts that are sequences. So when one sequence ends, another one begins, and it has like a little intro, a mini intro, and a mini climax to each sequence, were the main takeaways from this one.
Yeah, I mean, really, this is another one where we're just so new to everything, and I point to this one. I mean, I know you said Morgan Estate was closer to one that potentially didn't get finished. But man, Invited, I'm surprised we got as far as we did. I'm surprised we got the final product. So, I mean, again, that's amazing for the team to execute on, and to just get something to that level. But, to kind of go through those top things. Yeah, the big one that, really comes down to just understanding when you're like managing a team like this on set, that every single additional person you adds a multiplier to the process, and like the time to get them ready, time to get them going. And like, even with the audio, now we're using the lofts. Yes, we do want to do a boom eventually to get really the full scape of it. But for an indie filmmaker, not even having to worry about a boom operator, not in the sense of, even if they're going to do a good or bad job, because again, we had good boom operators. The issue was, it's a tough job to do consistently. And it also, I have audio rolling, video rolling, like there's that delay. Where's the guy? We need to get him. Do we need audio? Like, you're just adding so much stuff on top of a big cast and crew that is going to come up to you. So I think, really using the lav mic is a huge one that I would just recommend to all beginner filmmakers, because it's so easy, and like the simplicity of it and the way it can reduce it, get your team to as low as you possibly can. We basically don't have more than 4 or 5 people on set ever, unless it's like one scene or another scene that requires all of them. It's really, really tight shoots, and that's just going to help you out a ton when it comes to just the process. And then, as you mentioned in the writing, the biggest thing you got to do is the first thing that me and you talk about is, what are the beats? and we agree on the beats, because if we agree on all of the beats, well, then the details are going to be there. Maybe usually what it ends up now, like for the shapeshifter one, it really was the same movie ever since the beats. We just kind of were trying to figure out what's the characters and who dies and who becomes a shapeshifter. So we feel like we've really got that down pat. But overall, what would you say? I mean, with like the invited and those things, do you think? I think it was probably the most beneficial production wise, because it strayed us far away from the other side of, imagine, hey, we had another small movie and we went even bigger on something. Like, I think it was as close to disaster as we can for just overdoing production and over costing yourself.
Yeah, we were just children of summer with this one. It was just, we bit off too much that we could chew. We thought we were better than we were. We didn't have the skill level to pull this off. I mean, you see it a lot in indie films. Like, I watch a lot of indie films. I'm like, wow, that's actually a really cool concept, but you don't have the budget and the skill to pull it off. And it's, you get something like The Invited. But I mean, I'm happy I did it, because there are things that we could pull from that. Once again, like the fact that we completed it, we uploaded it, and I can look at it. I can easily do an Invited 2.0. It's not a problem. And there were a lot of good things that we did in that movie that, now that I have skill, like more skill, and I can, have a budget behind it, I feel confident that we could probably do a 2.0 version, but it would just be, we have other scripts and ideas that we can do before this one that are a little bit more feasible. Because if I was going to do the Invited one again, I'd really want to make sure that I do it right. So it's not like where we could just continually do these haunting of the murder house and the suicide house, and I could, level up that way. The Invited, like a 2.0 Invited, is still going to be, it's going to be, a pretty big production.
Yeah, and that was really one where, when we were doing the Q&A about the Invited this week and the super fans were asking about it, I was like, I love the idea, but like I would never touch that for a while, because again, it does require, and this is always my biggest recommendation to writers, is like, understand that like you don't have a budget, and it's up to you to understand that you need to make yourself, accountable to some degree, so people who are producing this can actually understand what it's going to cost. And that's something where I think The Invited really woke us up to that. And again, we kind of see it when you go in one direction, well then, go ahead and swing back to the other. And I think that's the perfect example with the Unseen. And honestly, the Unseen, I feel like I've warmed up to it more. I was really kind of, not as, when it comes to ranking them, again, they're all incredibly proud of. It's amazing, but it was always one where like I just didn't really like the overall idea of it. I was like, like I wouldn't really want to make a 2.0, like we've talked about it before. But you know what? Like, in watching it, we did a really good job. It was an easy set. Like, when you add those things together, it really was a solid movie. And I think it was our first step in like really the right direction of production. And again, it was a very simple idea, very simple movie. But what are kind of your overall feelings on the Unseen?
I mean, yeah, the Unseen was the one that, like, if we would have missed on the Unseen, I would have had a lot more doubt as far as like the overall business model. The fact that the Unseen essentially made its money back in 2 weeks, and just flew through Amazon charts, which is absolutely watched an absolute ton. Was really like, it was good to see that. I was proof that the business actually works, that you can get your money back from this and you can kind of scale this up. Now, this is back when Amazon was in its prime. They were paying 15 cents an hour, and they were pushing indie stuff as well. So we probably got caught in the algorithm. It was boosted and people liked the concept. So, I mean, the Unseen, I think, really refines our process of, how we shoot, minimalistic shooting. And, it's a clean story. And I'd love to make an Unseen 2.0. I just don't know how to do it. It's such a simple script that it's difficult to get an hour and 20 minutes out of it. So it's the complete opposite of The Invited, where The Invited, I'd like to do it. I just got to figure out how to make it simple. And The Unseen, I like to remake The Unseen, but I just don't know how to make it more complex. We're missing almost 20, 30 minutes of stuff in there. And maybe I'll give it some thought, because it did so well and people did like it. It was just very indie, and the production quality wasn't up to like what we do now. I think if you take our production quality that we did with the Murder House and we apply it to this movie, I think the feedback will actually be pretty good.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, honestly, as I mentioned, I'm kind of warming up to it. So I think we can maybe take a crack at it. Like, we'll see how it goes. We still are setting low on some of it. It could be a found footage one potentially. So we'll see what we end up settling for that. But yeah, it really was that first shine of like, hey, yeah, this can actually work and this can actually be something that is as a business doable. And it really did shape our outlook moving forward. And again, I think the Invited was the danger zone. And I think since we pulled ourselves away from that, we haven't really found ourselves, that close. Morgan State came close. Devil did too, but I mean, that was just kind of harder ways for us to make our money back. So what were the three things, with the Unseen that you kind of thought we did really well?
Well, we figured out that the business works and the concept sells well. So the fact that you have something, you have a success that you can replicate, or at least attempt to replicate, is a huge boost to your ego. Because at this point, I didn't know if we'd get our money back or like how well these things would sell. So I was just kind of like walking around the dark, and then the Unseen came. And I was like, all right, well, if we can replicate this, then we have a business behind this. We can actually do this. We actually make movies full time. So the fact that it worked was just a huge boost. And, it just goes into showing you that if you have a good cover, if you have a good blurb, and you have a good title, good things will come your way. The second thing would be, it really kind of outlined our shooting style now, which is very minimalistic. It's one location, very small crew, not a lot of actors. And we just kind of put you in the house or the situation. We just kind of shoot. And we kind of went away from this for a little bit, but now I'd say it's even closer. Our shooting style is even closer to the Unseen. So it really started to get the idea of minimalistic shooting in my head, trying to make something super cheap, really look at the budget and try and make something, as cheap as I possibly can go, while still giving like a little bit of production value. So I thought the Unseen did a good job of that. And then like the dream stuff was really cool. And the throat grab I thought was really well done. And the intro on this one was also really well done. I thought we actually had, for the first time, a couple scares that actually were pretty decent. Were they the best? No, but they were like shocking, or at least got you like interested in the movie. So I'd say like the scares and the dream sequence stuff and some of especially the hook getting pulled were done pretty well.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I think, really the most important one was the business model, just because we always stress this needs to be a business if you really want to continue to do it, unless you have other ways to fund this and, you don't need to make your money back. But the actual, the scares and everything, and then having the minimalistic set, like, we really started to see something that, okay, we can wrangle this in, we can control this. And the intro is really, really good. Like, and I think we also figured out, for the kind of the first time, like, hey, if you can hit on the intro and the trailer and kind of the marketing elements, and you can ride that algorithm, there's something here. And then more importantly, like you said, the budget one. So I really see the Invited and the Unseen, between those two almost as like the really great goalposts for setting up where almost the budget should be. So with that being said, what were the three negatives that we, learned from as well?
It was because the writer who helped me write this had the cabin location, and it was her sister who was in the movie. I didn't really do any pre-production. And I think the biggest issue with that was that we had the male lead was like a fresh new actor, and we kind of just brought him on set. And I had talked to the writer, I talked to the sister, but I never really did a lot of pre-production with this guy. So he's just thrown into this environment. And I think you can kind of see it in the movie. In the earlier scenes, there just wasn't a lot of chemistry with the sister, and they just weren't really comfortable with each other, because it's completely my fault. We never did any pre-production. I don't think they even met until the day of shooting. And I think you can see that. So I think it really, I learned to do pre-production to make sure everyone sees each other, meets each other before. So, or at least like texts or calls or does Zoom or does something to essentially, feel more comfortable with each other. moving forward. I thought the camera work really needed to be more cinematic on this one. This was one where we started to look at, trying to get like more cinematic lenses and just better coverage and better footage that just looked more cinematic. This was for, the DP used a zoom lens, which is just not cinematic at all. Very awkward cuts, and the camera motion was just all over the place. The color and lighting, I didn't think were very good in this movie. So at this point, I was like, all right, well, I got to start learning about the camera and what goes into, proper coverage and what goes into, using cinematic lenses and proper lighting technique. This is where I started to really focus in on that, where I wouldn't really start DPing until a whole bunch of movies later, but it got my mind like starting to look down this rabbit hole of how to actually shoot something. And then post-production and editing, this one got edited really quickly. It got cut together really quickly. And then the editor couldn't do the color. And that was like a big thing. So you really have to understand all aspects of editing and know that, someone that you're working with knows how to cut a movie together, knows how to do sound, and also knows how to do the color. And if they can't, you have to realize that and, send it off to someone who knows what they're doing. But essentially the image kept falling apart on them. We weren't able to pass quality control. There was just a whole bunch of issues with this. And this, once again, this mistake taught me, I went down the rabbit hole of, post-production editing. I started working in Premiere. I started to research like proper color grading, how to actually, properly color things. So once again, this movie really taught me to start looking at how to film things and also a little bit into the editing process.
Yeah, I think, really when you look at it, the first two were kind of almost like anytime you do a new experience, you just have no clue what's going on. You're almost kind of like, whoa, and then you get through it. The Unseen, I think we started to get to that level of, okay, we're understanding, where we're at. And then, as you were diving deeper into the best way to solve a problem is being thrust into it, and you have to solve it. That's your job as a producer. That's legitimately where you need to find yourself. And it began to evolve into the state that you're on now, where essentially you can handle the entire film process. It really is something where you should be approaching that mindset, from the beginning. I think one of the major ones to me, though, is, kind of as you mentioned in the last one with the production value. And honestly, I think the first few movies really should be focused on just the fundamentals of lighting, sound, all of those things. Just really try and get those clean because it's easy to build there. There's nothing more like, okay, great, you filmed a great scene, but for whatever reason, you technically can't use it. So definitely focus on that. But I think one other thing with The Unseen is it showed us the opposite end of the spectrum where it's a single house. And, it just looks like there's a single house, very boring backdrops. There's one cool room that had like a little creepy hole in it. But like, other than that, you're just in the same environment. And I think that's when we learned on the other side of things, because even when we do things like Girl in Cabin 13 or whatever, we have scenes and shots that are at least in a different area because you get the same production value feel. And then lastly, to echo what you mentioned, not only did we bring the male actor in basically with no prior experience, but literally the ways that we did the dialogue scenes was it went from them moving in to probably like the most romantic scene that we had with them on the couch. So literally you go from, hey, moving, which is actually a good idea to do because you get them up and loose, to something where they literally have to have like the closest scene they have. And when we talk about it in our acting bell curve, you want to save that for when they're comfortable with each other. And those are just things that you end up learning. Overall, though, people like The Unseen as well. I think the biggest feedback we got with The Unseen is I wish it was longer, which that shows in the indie film style of production. You end up losing minutes quicker than you think. Overall, though, I mean, would you say that you see The Unseen, I think it was the first one where we see an overall improvement, just in the sense of the way we handled the set, which is super important. But I mean, this was the first one that actually had, pop scares, or at least attempts at pop scares, where you didn't really see that in Gone. You didn't really see that in The Invited.
Yeah, I think the pacing was better. I think we had the pop scares. We actually had like a little bit of a horror concept going. So I definitely think there was improvement on it. Was it the best? No, but I think you saw progress, or at least I saw progress from Invited. And the fact that it did so well on Amazon was just, essentially the cherry on top.
Yep. And so with that, we move on to the haunting of the Whitlow house. And I think almost, like I said before, this is kind of, okay, we got the left boundary with a little too crazy to do. We got the right one with, a very simple idea. And Whitlow was kind of in the middle. I still think it's a bit aggressive for our budget level right now, just because it would kind of require the grander finale. With that being said, I think we really honed in on a solid horror idea. We utilized the resources that we had, which allowed us to actually execute the idea. But, overall, I really see Whitlow as the first DBS model film where we finally understood some of the basics that we could almost get our first little bit of a style to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Whitlow is still probably my second favorite movie. I really like it. It's got a lot of character to it. It's like your quintessential indie horror movie. I think it's just a cool concept, and I really want to remake it. I think, once again, similar to The Invited, you're going to need a little bit of a budget because it needs a really good climax on it. It needs a lot of people. It needs a lot of extras to be in there. It needs a lot of blood and gore. But I mean, the story's solid. I think we have to just figure out like a couple tweaks as far as like adding more time and money pressure to the main couple. But I mean, it's there. The concept's there. I think it's a good concept, but once again, it's just a little bit out of our reach at this time. But I was really happy with the movie. I was happy with how it went. It got completed, and I was happy with the final product. So I really like the Whitlow house. It holds a special place in my heart.
Yeah, it really does. It's a great movie. Highly recommend you guys check it out. So let's go ahead, hop in. What were the 3 things that we did really good with the Whitlow house?
I'd say the intro. The intro is probably one of our best intros, if not our best intro. It does a lot of things. It builds mystery. It builds suspense. The actors are moving, so it's not boring. They're in this really cool location, which is like a haunted house. And they're also building the lore and explaining parts of the story while they're walking. So you're already diving into this movie, and we're already explaining and building the world and building the rules of the world while you're watching these people walk around with a little lantern. So the light's really cool. It's in a really cool location, and there's little pop scares in there. And then the ending of the intro hook is powerful. You see someone get stabbed. You see a seizure. You see frantic people. And it's a good 7-minute sequence. Like if I took that sequence and made it a short, it'd probably do very well on like a festival circuit. I think people would really, really like it. So I think that one, we did an intro really well. And I think we learned a lot from that, especially doing like longer intros. And we fell back on that in the Murder House. I think the Murder House wasn't as good as this intro just because you had multiple people talking and explaining the lore. But I definitely think if you can do a longer intro, I think it hits a little bit better. Pending you could pull it off and, not make people turn off the movie, which is your biggest risk, is that if it's boring or you're not getting to the meat of the movie fast enough, people will turn it off. So I say the intro was a big takeaway from that. The other thing that I thought we did well was, our ability to do pickups. We filmed a lot of pickups from this one in our office. We essentially just, for the first time, really had to think out of the box on how to just essentially create an extra haunted house so we can get a scare in there. And we just took a day and we redecorated one of these offices that are in my building with like trash bags and sheets, and made it look like a haunted house. And this was the first time where we really had to sit down. We're like, all right, this movie is missing something in the climax. We don't have access to go back into that location. How do we think outside the box and get this done? And being able to do that and that kind of critical thinking is key to any filmmaker, because you're going to find yourself stuck at some point, and you're going to have to think critically to get you essentially get yourself out of that situation and get a finished product. And then finally, I thought that you have to hold here because I actually forgot the Whitlow house.
Oh, you didn't do it?
I didn't do it. So I'm like kind of ad-libbing. I'm trying to think what other thing that I really like about. So I think the final thing was like the dream sequence. I thought we had some really well-paced dream sequences. I thought also the montage scene, the research montage scene was done really, really well. And that's something that we kind of fall back on. So both of those, the dream sequence and the research montage were just two things that were like, all right, we did these really, really well. Let's put them in other movies. So in a lot of DBS movies, you're going to see the research montage and you're going to see the dream sequence. And I think the montage with the printer, and it's kind of like you're cutting to a noise, was something that was really cool that we did. It's kind of like an editing trick that anytime you can cut to a noise or a sound just to keep that pace and that the tension, and almost like the Edgar Wright style of editing. And you'll see a lot of it in the Murder House. It's just a cool way to keep the pace and keep everyone's interest in a fun, unique way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the intro, because if you listen to the DBS update, I basically mentioned, like, I was really pushing that we look at doing the intro for the shapeshifter a lot grander, because I'm a firm believer in, if you can almost tell your plot in the intro, it works as the first lore dump, as you were mentioning. But if someone's about the idea, it's like, sweet, you like it? Well, guess what? There's way more of it. So, I'm excited for the intro of the shapeshifter. The only risk that I think I have is I'm going to be acting in it. So as long as I can figure out how to do that, we'll be good to go. But I definitely agree. I think your intro needs to, I always say now the intro is the most important. I think the intro is the most important and the climax is the second most important. Intro is most important because they'll turn it off. Climax is most important because if you leave them with a bad climax, they're going to give you a 1 star because that's what they remember. But intro is so huge. We definitely did a good job with it. It already sets the tone. I love watching it. And then from there, you've already killed 10 minutes. So you're pretty much good to go when it comes to extending the length of your movie, which is, it's hard to get minutes out there. And yeah, it kind of goes back to what I think the style of the Whitlow house really showed the first, level of the montage, level of the research scene, the longer intro. Those are all calling cards, I think, to kind of the DBS style. And I think, it really kicks it off, and it's cool. It's a cool one. Definitely one that we want to love to revisit. So, with that being said, what were kind of the 3 elements of the Whitlow house that, we did poorly, which, stuck out even more?
Yeah, I'd say the first one would just be the lighting in the movie. We had the lights on, we had the windows open. It's just a very bright movie, which is not the tone you want when you make horror movies. So I think if we just went back and, blacked out the house or just done a lot of stuff at night, it would have built more tension and it would have built the atmosphere that we're really going to, or what we were trying to get, which is just 2 people stuck in a haunted house with a whole bunch of clowns and other creepy stuff around them. And like, they're getting possessed essentially. And we never really got that from the movie. It was just too bright. There wasn't a lot of tension. So I think, understanding how to properly light things in a horror atmosphere was like a main takeaway from this one. I'd probably say, the climax was just not like, it was not properly planned would be like the biggest thing for me. And it just, we had a cool location. We had a bunch of extras in there, but like, I never really sat down with the DP and really laid out how we were going to do this. So it's rushed, it's missing things. And, at that point we were just tired, trying to figure out stuff on set when, we're running 18-hour days. There was no air conditioning on this set. So it was kind of like a fever dream. And so we saved the climax for the end. So we're sweaty, we're tired. We're in this warehouse without air conditioning. It just wasn't a good thing. And there was no brain power between all of us working. So we came up short with the climax. And I think it just taught me to, number one, try and put the climax earlier in the movie. or earlier in the production schedule so you can give it the time it deserves. And just make sure you're doing this in pre-production. You know exactly what you're trying to do. There's nothing stopping me from going out to that location and really figuring out, all right, how do we get 20 minutes from this final climax? And that's just on me. And then, we had some issues with the footage in this movie. Really make sure your exposure's, proper, proper camera settings, that you're getting proper lighting. A lot of the footage was falling apart on this movie. We had sensor problems. There was like a green glow in some of the scenes. And so a lot of it was like out of focus at points. So it was just a little bit more difficult to tell this story because we didn't have the coverage that we needed to essentially, get the story told like I wanted it. So we're having to fall back on really one shot. This is like the only shot we could use because it's the only, shot that isn't falling apart or has issues. So just making sure you have proper coverage was like a big learning lesson from this one, that you have wides to fall back on, or at least you have other shots that you can fall back on if one of your shots is corrupted or have some kind of issues.
Yeah, no, I really do think those who are still kind of with us, feeling out the process and understanding it, that was definitely an intense shoot when it comes to just the environment. While it was good because it saved on the budget, we also didn't, due to issues that were just basically popped up during that, we didn't end up having water, and there's like no air conditioning in one of the areas. So those are things that are going to end up coming up. And it taught us to just kind of deal with that, get through that process, and just figure out how to make it to, the other side of this. So yeah, I think really the Whitlow house kind of started the process, in my opinion. And with that, we ended up making, 4 more movies in the Hateful Eight. We have Grown Cabin 13, which is our 9th movie, which is a huge step up. And then we have the 10th movie, which we're actually going to be showcasing tonight. If you are a super fan, we're going to show you guys so we can get your first look review. But it's something where this is the beauty of making a movie. You end up learning a lot. The experience you get, the benefits from both what you learn in the good and what you learn in the bad, really just highlight, the benefit of completing something. So that's always going to be our biggest advice. And we'll go ahead, we'll go through the next 4 movies on our next episode, but be sure to take a look at us on our Discord. Be sure to take a look at us online. We got a lot of other cool stuff for you. Always happy to talk with indie filmmakers. And so if you want to go ahead and find us, there's definitely a lot more we offer. But until then, have a good one.